Well, this part two to roping my first steer. A little correction. I said said the wrong name about the arena. That arena down there was Boyut's Arena, and Howard Farian had that property leased. And he just bought some roping steers and put in there. So we threw our steer in there, that crazy little Corriente. And my dad gets up there on his horse, backs into the box, and he's going to show us how it's done. Yeah, so I get up there on the chute. He nods his head. I trip the gate, and that steer goes just fast. I mean, fast, running to the end of the arena, and he jumps before my dad could even throw a loop on him. He's headed over the fence, and my dad runs up to the fence, and he's swinging. He drops his loop on that steer's horns, but he didn't dally. And that steer took off to the wild blue yonder, just down toward the river or off through the trees, dragging my dad's brand new rope. My brother runs down and he opens the gate on the end of the arena and opens the gate going in the pasture. And as my dad goes flying by on his horse, he grabs my brother's rope out of his hand and takes off to go rope this steer. And I've got my rope and I'm swinging, I'm kind of saving my horse and gauging where this steer's going to go. And the steer goes down and jumps another fence. And my dad runs out there and he takes my brother's rope and he's trying to keep from tripping his horse on that first rope that's dragging in the weeds. And he ropes a second time, gets it around that steer's horns, but he didn't dally again. And so now that steer is dragging two ropes behind him. And the steer goes down, he goes through another fence. And my dad comes running up beside me, give me your rope, give me your rope. And I'm not giving my rope, you'll lose my rope. I had a brand new rope and I was ready for my try. I wanted to get my chance in. So my dad goes over there and he ends up convincing me very sternly to give him my rope. So he ropes that steer a third time. And guess what? He didn't dally. So now the steer is running wild with three cowboys chasing him and three ropes dragging on the ground, headed down through the bogs and through the trees and out in the field. And finally, I got behind him and I've running along there trying to keep from getting my horse's feet tangled up. And the steer gets bogged down in a slough out in the middle of the pasture. And I bailed off my horse and ran over there and I picked up a rope. And my dad comes running up and I handed him the rope and finally he dallies up. And it takes us like an hour and a half or 2 hours to get this steer back to the corral, put him back in after all this first started. Mind you, this is the first steer that we've ever roped for the evening. And get him back in the corral, took all the ropes off, and as we're leaving the corral, my dad tells us, he says, the next time anybody ever even mentions roping for fun, you got to buy 3 brand new ropes. So we never did bring up the subject again. And my dad's, I love him to death, and I know you're going to watch this and feel like a failure, but he didn't ever know how to teach in a lot of ways. Like some people are just really good at teaching, but he never did discourage us. He just gave us the reins and let us figure it out on our own. He gave us the freedom, I guess, to learn on our own, and sometimes life is the best teacher. If I had anything different to do, I'd say if you can't teach, your kids are going to follow somebody. They're going to follow their dreams one way or another. They're going to do what they really long to do. If you're not able to teach them, take them to somebody who will teach them and teach them right so that they don't get in a wreck. But all that being said, I had a wonderful, wonderful growing up, wonderful time, and I went on to learn how to rope. Didn't have an arena for years, but I had a blind steer, and that was one of the best teachers because he could barely see enough, and he'd lope along in front of my horse, and I trained a bunch of horses on that blind steer just out in the pasture. And I had another one that had pink eye real bad, and he'd gotten real blind, and we had him in the same little hay meadow, and he'd just walk along in front of the horse, and he stayed in the short grass, and I learned how to heel off my horse.